Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
All right, and good morning to you. Happy Friday, everybody. It is Sports Daily here on KFH 97.5 and 1240. I'm Tommy Castor on this day number 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Paul Savage joins me today on the show in for Jacob Albracht. Chad Chambers back in the studio producing the program today. The KFH hotline is open all morning long at 869-1240. Glad you can join us this morning. We're also streaming our video live on Facebook, also on YouTube and on Twitch. You can join us there, comment along with the program today. And we are live like we were yesterday at the Kansas Star Casino, the FanDuel Sportsbook down here at the Kansas Star Casino in Mulvane. Glad to be here for a second day in a row. I'll tell you what, Paul, yesterday was so much fun. You know, leading up to the first round games, the first day of the opening round, as we did the show yesterday morning, it was busier and busier and busier here at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Today's going to be the exact same way.
And why wouldn't it be? It's so much fun. I'll tell you what, a place like this adds so much more fun to the watching of this tournament that it's amazing. And if you get a chance, come out sometime during the course of the day. They've got a ton of TV screens, and as we talked about yesterday, right in the middle of everything, they got a TV screen that is, as I said yesterday, as big as my house. It's really an amazing setting, and you're with like-minded people who love sports, love basketball, love the opportunity to put a little money at risk to make some money, and it's just a lot of fun. This has been really a good experience.
Yeah, it's been so much fun. So we appreciate the folks here at the FanDuel Sportsbook for allowing us to be here and broadcast our show live both yesterday and today. Today, we've got so much to talk about, and I would say the vast majority of it is related to the NCAA tournament. That's really what we're going to be focused on here today. I would say we also will spend a little bit of time talking about the transfer portal. Big news for Wichita State yesterday as their leading scorer, Colby Rogers, has officially entered the transfer portal. We will get into that. But let's start with yesterday, and let's start with the last game of yesterday's slate of NCAA games, and that's the Jayhawks. We talked about it a lot yesterday, Paul, as Kansas took on Samford. The Jayhawks got out to a big lead early. They went into the locker room up at halftime, got the lead up to about 22 points in the second half. And then here comes Samford, and they started hitting their threes. They weren't making them quite as much in the first half, Paul, but they did in the second half. They cut the lead down to 1. It was an incredibly nail-biting game towards the end, down the stretch for the Jayhawks, but Kansas pulled it out, got the 4-point win. They will face Gonzaga tomorrow afternoon.
Well, I'll tell you, the threes, the equalizer that makes college basketball so interesting. Why do we pay attention to a 16-1 or a 15-2? Or in this case,
for that reason. That reason, exactly.
Because somebody gets hot with threes, you know, you step out and defend, then you open up the lane. I mean, it's kind of a, pick your poison type situation. But if you can hit threes, you can play with anybody. As a matter of fact, ask Kentucky.
Well, without a doubt.
Ask Kentucky.
100%.
I mean, that was basically, they're playing Oakland out of Michigan, by the way. I had to look it up. I wasn't sure where. I knew it wasn't in Oakland, California, but I wasn't sure where it was. By the way, Rochester, Michigan. Did not know that. Looked it up. But anyway, Oakland hit threes, changed the course of this game. They have a kid that's 24 years old who's in his 6th year of playing basketball, 6 years of basketball, and hits nothing but threes. Learned later or throughout the broadcast, and I can't remember his name. I'll look it up here in a second. But this is a kid who's made 4 2-pointers all year long.
Yeah,
4 2-pointers, and he makes 3 after 3 after 3. Gets hot, and basically it's his hot hand at the 3 that brings down Kentucky, and that's what we live for in this tournament. That's what we do this for.
And, I think that there's quite a bit of discussion, and we'll get into it later on in the show about the future of John Calipari after that opening round loss for Kentucky. But with the Kansas game, Paul, the game that, ended day number 1 yesterday, it took a great shooting effort from the Jayhawks, especially in the first half, to win that game. Kansas finished with a 60% clip shooting from the field last night. And that's really what it took. It was a 93-89 win for the Jayhawks. And really my biggest fear, my biggest concern going into this game, Paul, was what would happen if this game turned into a track meet. I didn't think that Kansas could hang with Samford because of the fact that they didn't have a ton of depth, because of the fact that they don't particularly shoot the ball well from long distance. It got into a track meet down the stretch, and Kansas, I think, I mean, I'm just going to be flat out real about it. Kansas was incredibly fortunate to come away with the victory in that game.
Kansas held on better with fatigue than I thought they were going to. I honestly thought there was the possibility of basically running the Jayhawks out of the gym. That's what I thought. That's what I thought was going to happen, but they hung pretty well, and they ran pretty well. I mean, you look at the score. If you look at the score and not know who was who, with the point difference, you think to yourself, well, this was a game that KU probably lost because they're up and down the floor.
Yeah.
The score indicates it's up and down the floor. There's a lot of movement. And by the way, Oakland, they didn't waste much energy, did they? I'm sorry, Samford.
Yeah.
Samford didn't waste much energy, did they? Samford was not only were they up and down, but they pressed every possession. No time off. Bill Self even said in the interview after the game, this is a team that he was struck by how they continued to apply pressure on the physical part of up and down and making them work. And he says, usually you see a team take a break somewhere along the line. They break and they take a period of time where they don't. He said, it never stopped. Never. Right. And he's right. It never stopped. If you stop and analyze this game, the pressure from Samford never stopped. Yeah. And that's what was really kind of cool.
Yeah, the full 40 minutes of action.
The full 40.
Samford was full court pressing that entire time.
Everything.
And you know what? It was a difference in the first and second half, because in the first half, I thought Kansas did a remarkable job of breaking that press. You know, they were able to get the ball, for the most part, past half court, and then really it allowed some open shots for the Jayhawks. That's part of the reason why they shot so well in the first half. And then, you know, I don't know if it was fatigue. I don't know if, you know, really what played into it. But with about, 15 minutes left in the second half and then all the way through, the Jayhawks started to have a little bit more trouble, you know, with that press. And then Samford started to hit their threes on the other end of the court. And really that was when we saw the pendulum swing from Kansas to Samford. We've got to talk about the foul call.
Oh boy.
At the end of the game. It's what social media was a buzz about last night. It's what all the national outlets are talking about this morning. With about, just a few seconds left in the game, Nick Timberlake for the Jayhawks on a fast break down the court. He was all by himself. And what looked to be a pretty remarkable block from Samford was called a foul. Nick Timberlake shot 2 free throws that kind of iced the game for the Jayhawks, and Kansas won the game. Had that foul not been called, the ball had clearly went to Samford, and Samford would have had numbers on the other end. They could have scored, and then at that point, we'd be talking about an upset. We probably would be talking about an upset this morning. That didn't happen. The referee called a foul. Where do you land on the way that whole final segment played out?
The worst call in the history of the NCAA tournament with regards to an official. That's what I call it, because there's no debate. I mean, I've seen the replay, 5-6 times. I've seen it. I've watched it. I've watched it in slow motion. Not only does the body of the KU player not be touched physically, it's not touched by the shirt, by the hand. The hand on the ball isn't even touched. You know, the hand when it's touching a basketball is a part of the ball. You can actually block a shot by hitting a hand that is located on the ball. The ball has the hand as a part of it. And with that being said, the block came and it didn't even touch the hand of the shooting hand. All ball, no body. It may have been the most. And I'll tell you what, Tommy, KU's lucky to have that win, because that changed everything. That block changed everything, but the 2 shots on the foul changed everything once again. And it's amazing to me, because really and truly, KU lost that basketball game. I think they would have. Now, I mean, there's still basketball to play, and obviously, you know, Samford still has to make some shots. But Tommy, it changed everything. It changed everything with regards to that game. But it was the cleanest, most beautiful block I've ever seen in the history of the NCAA tournament.
So here's where I land on this entire thing. Was it a foul? Probably not.
No, it wasn't.
Probably wasn't.
Well, thank you for that.
But in that scenario, down the stretch in that game, what did we think was going to happen? That the referee's going to probably make a call in that moment.
What? How about making the right call? How about doing the right thing? How about that for a concept?
Okay, you're in the NCAA tournament. There's only a few seconds left down the stretch. You know what the referee did there? And I'm not defending him. I'm just telling you realistically what it is. That's an anticipatory call. The referee was anticipating much more contact on that play, and he blew the whistle. Right now, as it stands in college basketball, that's not a reviewable play. You can't go back to the monitor and look at that. That's not part of the rules of the game. Is it the right thing? Probably not, but it's the reality of the way college basketball is right now. So I get the uproar. I get the outrage. I understand what you're saying with all of that. But at the same time, it's the way college basketball is officiated. And until there's some kind of change, it's just the way that it's going to be.
Well, it's going to, sure. I mean, the human error factor is what you're talking about.
Right.
And there's going to be, and I'm not saying every call that was made went, KU's way. I mean, obviously there's somewhere throughout the course of the game, there are going to be calls that, are shaded towards Sanford. I get that. And I understand what you're saying, but with the time left in that game, with the situation with points, with putting a man on the line who didn't deserve it, it changed the whole course of the whole game, because the 2 sank free throws changed the point total from one possession to 2 possessions. Yeah. And that changed everything with the time left, Tommy. That's the reality of the situation.
We see it all the time where referees, they've got the whistle ready to blow and they're anticipating contact.
That's right.
They anticipate the contact. And, as the play is developing, I'm sure subconsciously they're thinking, okay, this is a play that more times than not has quite a bit of contact.
Yeah. Nick Timberlake went flying. I mean,
sure.
The way his body went vertical and sideways, it gave the impression that he was hit with the body. I mean, if you were just looking at it casually, you would have thought that. Obviously, the body was never touched. And part of the problem was his momentum caught his hand on the backboard. His hand stopped and his body kept. And that's part of the way he ended up becoming sort of vertical before he went to the ground.
Yeah.
Looked like a foul. I mean, it looked like a foul. It smelled like a foul. The only problem was that it wasn't a foul.
You can't
it was
review
not
that.
a foul.
You can't review that. Well, I know. I mean, it's one of those things where I absolutely understand the outrage. And I know, I'm sure, Paul, that, I'll be labeled as a KU homer. I get that. I understand that. But at the bottom line is that the call was made. And until you have a situation in college basketball where those kinds of plays are reviewable, you live and die by that sort of thing.
Well,
is it unfortunate that the referees kind of took the outcome of the game into their own hands? Sure. But I also don't buy the argument that this was something that, the referee in the moment thought, okay, it's going against Kansas, so I'm going to go ahead and give them a friendly whistle.
That did not happen.
That's
nuts.
Doesn't happen.
That's conspiratorial, and it's not happening.
The referee was anticipating contact
he was.
on a play that typically has contact with it.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it the right call, but it is the realistic way that those plays are typically called in college basketball.
Well, 9 out of 10 of those kind of plays,
there's
going to be contact.
There's contact.
So you're preconditioned, obviously, with the setup of the play, the speed of the play, the way it's going, the positioning of the 2 players going in, one for the defense, one for the offense. I get that.
I
get it.
I wholeheartedly believe, not to cut you off, but I wholeheartedly believe that if the roles were reversed and it was the same scenario, but it was Kansas chasing down Sanford, that call would have been made.
Oh, I think you're probably right. No. I am not arguing, and nor am I implying that there's something notorious or dubious about the call. The call was just screwed up. I mean, it's not the only blown call. I mean, if you analyze everything, there's probably a half a dozen blown calls
in every game.
Right.
In every game. And there are a lot that sometimes they dictate the outcome. It doesn't make it right, But again, these referees are human.
Mhm.
They're in the moment. It's a bang bang play. It's like half a second when that happens, and of course, the referee's going to anticipate what he thinks will happen when that play, is actually in the moment and going on.
Yeah.
The bottom line is that the Jayhawks were. I agree with this. I believe this. The Jayhawks were absolutely fortunate to survive and advance. But isn't that the name of the game in the NCAA tournament? You survive and advance.
Well,
You win a game. It doesn't matter how you win the game. It doesn't matter how big of a margin you win. You win the game, you move on.
Mhm.
And now the Jayhawks have Gonzaga on Saturday, and Gonzaga looked outstanding against McNeese State yesterday.
Yeah.
I thought that Will Wade and McNeese State would win the game, and they
I did too.
didn't.
Oh, did you have them picked? Is that
I did.
I did too.
I did.
So, it's obvious I don't know anything about college basketball. You look at my brackets, Tony, I don't even know why you have me on the radio talking about sports. It's obvious from my brackets. I don't even know what I'm doing.
Not a good day for you.
I have no idea what I'm doing with college basketball. But anyway, I love your point about what you're doing. Maybe I'm gonna give, I'm a guy who likes to give ways to solve problems. I am, if nothing else in life, a problem solver. You know that about me, obviously.
One of your many qualities.
One of my many qualities.
Yeah.
And here's how you solve this: put a red flag in every coach's pocket and in the tournament. I don't even know that you need to do it in a regular season. I don't know that you need to. Maybe you do in the conference tournament. I don't know. Put a red flag in every one of their pockets, the head coach. And in the last 5 minutes, maybe the last 3 minutes, if there is a play that you flag and you want it reviewed in terms of a foul, go to the film. Now it stops the game, but you get one. Everybody gets one. And if you're wrong, penalize them somehow with losing of the ball, or I don't know how you do it. But if you make a call and it's wrong, something happens. I don't know what it would be, but you got to get this right. That was a big play. We don't know that Samford would have won the game. I don't know. I can't say that they would have, but I'm saying they lost the chance to win the ball game. They lost the chance to win that game, and I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah.
And that's not what we want in the tournament. That's not what we want. This tournament is built upon fantasy teams, the underdogs. This is one of the beautiful things about what's right with America, and that is that all basketball teams have a chance to succeed and play for a national championship. And that's what we like about it. We don't like seeing these opportunities taken away by a blown call, do we?
We don't. I absolutely sympathize with Samford. I sympathize with their coaching staff, with their players, their fan base, the university, all of that. Because yes, you are correct when you say that the opportunity for Samford to win the game was taken out of their hands because of the officiating.
That's right.
I don't know if I agree with your solution as far as challenging.
Well, you got to. You've got to allow and maybe you leave it up to the officials. Maybe, but you can't tell me that the reaction of the play up on the big board, the reaction that the crowd would have had, and I'm the official and I'm walking to administer 2 free throws, and I'm thinking to myself, what are they booing about? Oh, and he looks up and he watches that play and he goes, oh crap, I think I blew that.
So here's why I don't agree with that call. You're a football coach.
I am.
Okay. You remember when the NFL experimented with reviewing and challenging the pass interference play a couple of years ago, where coaches could throw a flag and challenge pass interference one way or another?
Uh-huh.
That didn't work. There's a reason why the NFL doesn't do that anymore, because that's a subjective call based on contact. It didn't work in the NFL. Now, the spotting of a ball or whether or not a play went out of bounds and you challenge that sort of thing, like those things are more objective. You can see where the ball is.
Yes.
You can do, but if you are judging contact and a level of contact, that is entirely subjective.
Right.
And so you've got referees that are going to a monitor and they're reviewing in slow motion, multiple angles about contact or whatever. Then at that point, you're really getting really into the weeds. Like you're going to be looking at all these different angles, frame by frame. Was the guy's hand here? How much, did he push off? Like all these different things. There's a reason why pass interference penalties being challenged did not work in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't do it anymore. So I don't think that potentially would work in NCAA basketball. I get your thought process behind it. I understand why. But at the end of the day, I do agree and I do sympathize that Samford lost an opportunity to win that game.
Right.
The Jayhawks were fortunate to recover. They were fortunate to win the game. We've got more on that game. We've got more on all the NCAA tournament games, both from yesterday and from today. We are just getting started here on Sports Daily, live from the FanDuel Sportsbook at Kansas Star Casino. Tommy Castor, Paul Savage, Jad Chambers back in the studio. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody. It's Sports Daily here on KFH. Tommy Castor along with Paul Savage, Jad Chambers producing the program. The KFH hotline opened this morning, 869-1240. We really appreciate the folks down here at the FanDuel Sportsbook for having us down both yesterday and today for the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Paul, I know that you mentioned it before we went to break. Your bracket did not turn out particularly well yesterday.
No, you know something? It's amazing how this works out because I was pretty confident I was going to have a great bracket. Yeah. I was confident.
Well, everybody is. Everybody thinks they're going to do a great job until it actually happens.
Right. I went 9-7.
Okay, that's not very good.
No, that's not very. I mean, it's barely over 500. So I mean, golly, I just lost games that I don't know how I could be so sure I was right. I mean, I really was not going to be surprised if I ran the table yesterday. I thought I had all the little picks that nobody would pick but me. I thought I had those right. Turns out I was wrong on them. I had some that I was confident on that I was wrong on. And then you turn them and look at the University of Kansas. They were lucky to win. I would have been 500 if KU had lost. So no, wait a second. No, I don't. I picked Sanford
you
on that.
Sanford
That's right. So I would. So I mean, I guess it's just crazy. This is the craziest tournament. I just don't know how I could think I'm so right and be so wrong on this, Tommy.
Well, you should be used to it by now. That's an everyday occurrence in your life, Paul.
Thank you for that.
You were telling me before we came on the air today about ESPN brackets, and I always love hearing about this. I always love hearing, like, out of the millions of brackets that were filled out, how many are left after like one day.
Right.
You said it was what? It was like in the millions, but now there's only a handful.
Yeah, there 22 million brackets were filled out on ESPN. 22 million. Let that thing sink in. You don't think that this isn't watched by people?
Sure.
Now that's people that took time to log on. How many people don't even know how to log on or even know that ESPN has a bracket who are watching? But 22 million people filled an ESPN bracket, and after the first 16 games, there's like 1,800 that are brackets that are perfect.
That's it.
Think about it. Well, who would have picked some of the upsets who would have picked, let's say, Oakland
over Kentucky?
Who? I mean, did that even cross your mind that was an upset?
I had Kentucky making a little bit of a run in the tournament, so that was shocking for me. Obviously Duquesne beat BYU.
Right.
That was one.
Did not see that.
NC State over Texas Tech. There were a handful of them yesterday that were big upsets. Games that, I don't think a lot of people had Duquesne over BYU. And I know that was an 11 over a 6, so the seeding was a little bit, more together and the odds weren't that big. But at the end of the day, I thought BYU would win. Really, honestly, the SEC and the Big 12 didn't have very good days. I mean, KU won, but Texas Tech lost.
That's right.
BYU lost.
That is correct.
And then in the SEC, Mississippi State lost. Our buddy Chris Jans out of the tournament in the very first game. Who else lost? Obviously, Kentucky lost in the SEC. South Carolina lost. So there were, it was a rough day for the SEC and the Big 12. But that's a huge reason why we love March Madness.
Yeah, therein lies part of the problem. Why was my bracket so bad? I told you yesterday I was eccentric with regards to the Big 12 and the SEC. Remember, I made the comment that both those conferences played everybody so tough. I mean, every night. You take away the West Virginias, you take away the Vanderbilts,
right? You
take away those few teams at the very bottom of both those conferences. The SEC's tough. It's a lot tougher than I thought the Pac-12 was. A lot tougher than I thought the Big Ten was overall from top to bottom. And I know you've got Purdue, number one in the nation. I get that. I'm just talking about overall toughness of a conference. And so I went a little heavy on SEC. I went a little heavy on Big 12. I gave those conferences a little more due than I probably should have. I probably should have been a little more caring on looking at those teams individually and say, what can this team do again? But I didn't.
Yeah.
I went with, because both those leagues, it's a battle night in and night out, no matter who you're playing. And by the way, you can still lose to Vanderbilt in that league. But the point is obviously it was not the right philosophy, not the right way to handle it.
How about this? From yesterday, there were 3 games that featured a 6 seed and an 11 seed.
Mm-hmm.
all 11 seeds won yesterday. Duquesne over BYU, Oregon over South Carolina, NC State over Texas Tech. There's one more of those games today, and it actually was my favorite 11 over 6, New Mexico over Clemson. So if that happens, and I love New Mexico, I think Richard Pitino has done a phenomenal job this season.
That's right.
If that happens and they beat Clemson, then you've got all 4 11 seeds advancing to the second round.
Right.
It's you can never predict this stuff, the way that it all breaks down.
If New Mexico was playing in the pit, I might take New Mexico.
Yeah, okay.
But I'd probably still take Clemson at this point right now, just because of the overall talent and, the overall conference and, the things that I look at that have obviously not served me well.
Yeah.
But this game isn't being played in the pit. It's being played in one of the, what is it? I think it's the West Regional. Is that, or that's the West Regional, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, so with that being said, I think that is a game that New Mexico can win. Now, I've got Clemson. I'm like you. You've got Clemson?
I've got New Mexico.
You got New Mexico?
That was my favorite upset pick. One of them.
That's a good one.
In the entire tournament.
That's a
New
good
Mexico
one.
Over Clemson.
It's a safe one. It's when you make the picks on the upsets that you have to, like I did yesterday 3 times. I had to check and see where these schools were from. I wasn't really even sure what state they were located. Wagner, I told you, Wagner was one of them.
Yep.
Staten Island, New York. I didn't know that. I didn't know. Oakland. I knew Oakland was not in Oakland, California.
Everybody thought it was. Everybody I talked to thought it was.
Yeah. Well, I happen to know it wasn't. The problem was I didn't know where it was from. Rochester, Michigan. Did not know that. And then, of course, Stanford, I didn't know where they were from either.
I want to go back to what you mentioned before the break about your grand idea about referees and coaches being able to have challenge flags in college basketball based off of the Stanford-Kansas result last night. I just want you to know you are getting beat up over that take on our video stream, on social media. People are not liking that take.
Well, what if it had been KU?
Not liking that take
okay, let me put it this way. What if it had been KU that had been the egregious party? What if that had happened? I guarantee you right now, everybody's, Savage is right. Oh, Savage, he's got it. That's exactly right. Savage, go, brother, you go. But I'll tell you what, it wasn't. It was Sanford that was the one that got the short end of this. I guarantee you part of that's a KU deal where people are saying, well, it was okay. It worked out fine. KU survived, and thank you for that call. But I guarantee if it had been just the opposite, I'd have every KU fan in the nation saying, guys, Savage onto something. It's not fair that a little school like that gets a blatant call and is able to beat the University of Kansas with a crappy call like that. I guarantee you that's the situation, Tommy.
I think that, and
I'm getting beat up probably by a lot of KU fans saying, hey, wait a second, we won fair and square. You did win fair and square. You won fair and square. I'm the first one to say that, Tommy. I'm the first one to say that.
Look, I think that this situation could have been at the end of any one of the games yesterday. Mm-hmm. And well, I would not be.
I don't know about that one.
I would not be in support of this idea that coaches should be able to challenge foul calls. I just don't think.
Well, what else are you going to do? How else are you going to do it? Are you going to let the officials say,
Look,
"Wait a second, maybe an official glances up to the scoreboard, the master scoreboard, up watching the replay and goes, geez, we kind of blew that one," and let them have a chance to correct themselves, maybe? What about that? I don't know. I don't know if the flag is the answer. I don't know how it is. I don't know how the mechanics should be with regards to challenging a totally blatant call that can change the outcome of a game. I don't know. I'll let the experts figure it out.
You keep saying change the outcome of a game.
Well, it could have.
We don't know.
Well,
that.
we don't know
for sure that's what would have happened.
But we can assume that the outcome could have been different, Tommy.
It could have been.
You know it could have been.
It absolutely could have been.
It sure could.
How concerned are you, by the way, about the lack of depth that Kansas has and the fact that they ran up and down that court for 40 minutes? They shot the ball well. They scored 93 points. It was one of the better shooting games that we've seen from the Jayhawks this year. Mm-hmm. But they turn around in just over 24 hours and play again against Gonzaga.
Right.
Now, Gonzaga doesn't have a ton of depth either. But are you concerned about tired legs for the Jayhawks?
Well, are you kidding? Of course I am. And will it happen with Gonzaga? I don't know. But I'll tell you what, somewhere along in this tournament, it may catch up. And all of a sudden, the leg. I mean, it just makes common sense. A lot of those players played a lot of minutes. They're going to be and look at the score. Look at the game was played in the 80s. That's a lot of up and downs, Tommy. That is a lot of movement, and that's a lot of time not to kind of, even if you're on the court, to kind of sit back and I can sit over here for just a second on offense and stop my move and sort of gather myself and refresh just for 10 seconds or so. Wasn't a lot of that. There was not a lot of opportunity to do that because the ball was changing hands so quickly and so efficiently on both sides of the ball that it was just fun to watch. But yeah, Tommy, you're onto something. There's going to come that game where all of a sudden the 24 hours of rest isn't enough. The legs are going to be the legs that they got to be, that Mother Nature has said you are, and there comes that point where you got to get more rest. If they can get through one more game, then they'll have a few days, and they'll take advantage of that. And I'm imagining Bill Snyder's going to be very. I'm sorry, Bill Self is. Gee, Bill Snyder. That's a flashback. I always loved Bill Self, but anyway, but I know Bill Self is going to be one of those guys that's going to say, "I get this team. We got to get them off their feet." They don't need practice as much as they need to stay off their feet and get their legs back. That's what he's going to do.
Yeah, and you could tell, at least I could tell last night, the way the Jayhawks came out of the gate, that they were rested. They might not be deep, but they were rested.
Well, they were more rested than I thought they were going to be.
Absolutely.
But I don't know why I would think that, because they didn't play, what was it, Tuesday or Wednesday was when they got beat in the I think it was Wednesday, wasn't it?
On Wednesday.
It was Wednesday. Yeah. So that gave them a window of a week, a little over a week. They don't have that now. I mean, they've got 24 hours, basically 24 hours, and let's go play.
You got to get through that Gonzaga game tomorrow, and then you've got more time to get rested and get those legs underneath you if you can make it to the second weekend. I want to preview this game against Gonzaga a little bit later on in the program.
All right.
But the one thing I want to say before we go to break, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit, because I said on this program that if the Kansas-Samford game turned into a high-scoring affair, the Jayhawks were not going to cover the number. If the game was a lower scored game, if it was in the 60s, maybe the low 70s, at that point I felt more comfortable taking Kansas for, and laying the points. I felt comfortable with that. But again, the game got up into the 80s and 90s. Kansas, they didn't cover the number. The number I think closed at 7.5. The Jayhawks won by 4, so they did not cover that number. I think that's going to kind of be the way that this team operates throughout the rest of the tournament. We're going to get into what we can expect from the Jayhawks against Gonzaga tomorrow. That game will tip at 2:15 on CBS. You can watch that in the second round of the NCAA tournament tomorrow. We're also going to talk about other games from last night, games that we like today, our favorite bets of day number 2 of the opening round, coming to you live from the FanDuel Sportsbook at Kansas Star Casino. It's Sports Daily. We'll be right back.
This is Sports Daily on KFH.
I got to tell you, Paul, one of the favorite things that I get to do on this program, one of my favorite things that happens with the course of this show, when you are on the show, is I love hearing from people that don't like your opinions on things.
Uh-huh.
One of my favorite things in the world.
Well, I'm glad I'm entertaining to you.
What makes it even better?
Wow.
What makes it even better is now we've added a new layer to it because we're out in public and people can tell you in person how much they don't like your opinions on things.
There you go. Well, that's just wonderful. Thank you, Tommy. You made my day.
Well, it makes my day every single time you come on the show. And I get to read comments on our video stream of people saying that, you don't know what you're talking about.
Well, that's partly true.
All of that. So it's always good entertainment for me. So I appreciate you providing that kind of entertainment here on the show.
Whatever I can do for you, Tommy. Whatever I can do, my friend.
Welcome back to Sports Daily here on KFH. I'm Tommy Castor along with Paul Savage. Filling in for Jacob Albracht today. Chad Chambers is producing the program. The KFH hotline, if you would like to tell Paul that you don't like his opinions, is open.
Give me a call.
Yeah,
give me a call.
I love it.
Let's talk about it because I'm right. I happen to be right on this, folks. Don't be KU homers. Do not
I'm not
be.
being a KU homer.
Oh, no.
I'm not being a KU homer.
Yeah. You're no homer.
Well, you can tell Paul if you don't like his takes on things. On the KFH hotline, 869-1240 is that number to call. You can also watch us on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. You can leave your video comments there. We've been looking at them throughout the course of the morning here on the program. You can send us messages on Facebook, all of that. We're live at the FanDuel Sportsbook down at Kansas Star Casino in Mulvane for day number 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Yesterday was so much fun down here at the FanDuel Sportsbook. And I got to mention this to you, Paul. I know that yesterday, actually both days, you brought your lovely girlfriend down here to the casino. You gave her $100 yesterday to go and gamble. Did you see any of that money?
No, of course not. I mean, for all I know, she won $20,000 and I didn't even know about it. But on the other hand, she may have lost most of it and kept whatever was left. But you know something? It's okay. We're having fun. We're having fun doing radio. We're being treated so well by the staff here. They're all so nice and friendly, and I'm really having a great time. And Tony's having a great time sitting here drinking coffee, and it's just a great atmosphere. And I hope, Tony, we get to come back again because this has been so much fun. Make it happen. Tommy, make it happen.
Did you give your girlfriend another $100 for today?
Yeah. Jeez.
But for all you know, she could have won a bunch of money. Why'd you give her another $100?
Well, you don't know anything about women, do you? Obviously, I'm going to have a little conversation and enlighten you on how women work.
I've only been married for about a decade.
Therein lies the problem. You haven't figured it out yet, have you?
Well, I mean, the bottom line is that she could be winning a lot more money. I mean,
well, she could be.
You never know. Like, we could hear the jackpots go off at some point, all the bells and whistles and the confetti. And
if that happens, I'm jumping up and I'm running over to find out. I'm leaving the mic and I'm going to go find out because that might be my money.
It probably is your money, and you're never going to see it again. What's that old saying? A fool and his money are easily parted or easily separated.
Yeah,
are you a fool?
Yeah, that doesn't say much.
Money
doesn't say much for me, does it?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I think judging by some of the comments we've gotten today, you might kind of be a fool.
Yeah, I'm just telling you. I'm telling you, this is a KU deal. I've insulted.
It's not a KU deal.
I've insulted the KU fans.
This could have happened to any team in any game in the NCAA tournament. It just so happened that it happened in favor of the Jayhawks last night.
Let me clear this up then. That way, maybe I'll get back into good graces of all the people that think I'm an idiot. That may not happen, but I'm going to give it a shot. Find a way. Maybe it's not a red flag in the pocket. Find a way, and maybe the officials can understand that they have that one or two opportunities at that point of the game. If there's a problem, and by the way, every place that is playing these games has a Jumbotron that's doing replay. They all do. And it's really easy. Sometimes you find out you made a mistake on the Jumbotron, not going over to the table and looking at the small monitor on the scoring table, but sometimes you just get it. You look up at the Jumbotron, there's the mistake, and you got to rectify it. Maybe there is a device, there is a way that these problems can be rectified because we all want it right.
Okay, how about this?
No matter who you are, you want it right.
So in the NFL, we talked about the pass interference
Right,
penalty and how that was
You did.
an utter disaster when the
It
NFL tried to
was.
review that.
That's correct.
What about, and this would make games go very, very long, but there could be maybe like somebody that's not on the court that in real time is evaluating some of these calls. In the NFL and even in college football, they've got people in other locations that are reviewing plays, reviewing calls, challenges on the field. There are official challenges, like the officials can go in and decide that they want to review a play and that sort of thing. My only concern is that you start doing that in college basketball. They're already going to the monitor and reviewing calls from time to time. My concern is that then you're going to make these games so much longer than they need to be.
Well, but we want to get it right. And I'm not even saying that you do it for the entire game, because right now it's being done a lot throughout the course of the game. I'm talking about reviewable situations that the umpires can take charge of. How about in the last 2.5 minutes? How about in the last 3 minutes? I mean, because, you have a close game. One call can literally decide the outcome of a game. And I'm not saying that happened last night. I'm just saying it had a big effect, though. I will say it had a huge effect. I'm just saying that at the course of the NCAA, and maybe we don't even do it for the regular season. Maybe we just make that a rule in the last 3 minutes for the NCAA tournament, that we get it right, Tommy, because if we don't get it right, that team that's been agreed does not get a second chance. There are no second chances. It's survive and advance. By the way, didn't Jim Valvano?
Yeah, that was him.
He was the one that coined that one. I thought that was right.
Back when Jim Valvano survived in advance, there weren't those challenges. There weren't the reviews.
Jeez.
And they won a national championship anyway.
Oh, geez.
I think
you had to get that in, didn't you?
I think it's ironic, Paul. We're not talking about any of the other missed calls in that same game that went against Kansas, because there were a few. We're not talking about those. They could have changed the outcome of the game. Could have helped Samford get back into it even more.
How many of
maybe
those,
even take the lead?
How many of those bad mistakes swung 4 points? Swung 4 points.
I don't think that you can, with certainty, say that it swung 4 points. It did two. I mean, Nick Timberlake made both free throws that he wouldn't have gotten otherwise, but there's no guarantee that Samford would have scored on the other end. They had numbers, but you never know. That's the beauty of college basketball.
Yeah, well, that's right.
And regardless, the Jayhawks survive and advance. We're going to get into their game against Gonzaga as we kick off hour number 2. Also preview the games coming up here in just over an hour. Day number 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. We're live at the FanDuel Sportsbook at Kansas Star Casino. It's Sports Daily. Hour number 2 is on the way next.
Now, from Wichita's most listened to sports radio, 97.5 and 1240 KFH. This is Sports Daily with Jacob Albracht and Tommy Castor.
Welcome back, everybody. Hour number 2 on a Friday edition of Sports Daily here on KFH. I'm Tommy Castor. Paul Savage in for Jacob Albracht today. Jad Chambers back in the studio producing the show. The KFH hotline is open the rest of the way for you, 869-1240. Would love for you to join the show, jump in, and you'll be able to give us a call and talk a little college basketball here today. I want to mention here off the top of the second hour, Paul, if you listened to the show yesterday, my voice was basically gone.
It was.
It was.
You struggled.
I didn't know if I was going to be able to get through the 2 hours.
That's right.
Much better today, so I appreciate all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny. Like I thought to myself, I was driving down yesterday morning, and I knew, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get through 2 hours of a show. And I thought, of all days, it's the first day of the NCAA tournament. We're on location. We're at the FanDuel Sportsbook. We're at the Kansas Star Casino. It's so much fun. It's going to be awesome. And I have no voice. Of all the days to have that happen,
right?
It happened yesterday.
Right. But you got through it. You
got through it, man.
I think a lot of people wouldn't even have noticed unless you brought it up.
Well, I noticed.
But you sucked it up and you showed some resolve. And by golly, you got through it, and it was a lot of fun. And now you're sounding much better today. Just in the course of conversation, I can tell you're better.
Thank you.
You're feeling better.
Well, and the crazy thing, I never was sick. I never felt bad.
Yeah, right.
I just woke up and just had no voice.
Had the voice.
Our buddy Jacob Albracht obviously hosts the show usually. Is out of town. Was out of town yesterday. Out of town today. We had kind of talked like, hey, if Jacob was in town, I probably wouldn't have done the show yesterday.
Well, that's what you were saying.
Yeah. But the show must go on. We gotta move forward. We gotta plow on, forge ahead. Much better today, and we really appreciate everybody here at the FanDuel Sportsbook.
Yeah. And by the way, thanks to Joe Rocco, our good buddy, a good friend of this show,
Rock's Dugout.
Rock's Dugout.
Yeah.
He's come down to the Kansas Star Casino. Look at the betting lines on a few of these games, and he's going to go play some slots and some stuff. Brought his lovely wife with him, Kathy, and they're here joining us right now in the audience, and glad to have them come. Come on down. If you got an hour, about an hour. Come on down, say hi to us, and we would appreciate it. Come on, let's go. It's a lot of fun.
Even if you can't make it before the show is up, obviously the
down.
Games tip off at a little after 11 o'clock this morning. So just over an hour from now, they're going to go all day long. To me, it sounds like a perfect plan to take the afternoon off of work. Take the Friday afternoon, start your weekend early, drive on down. It's like a 20-minute drive from Wichita. It's not that far down here to the FanDuel Sportsbook at the Kansas Star Casino. All the games on the big screens the entire day. And, of course, there were the major upsets yesterday that we've talked about, Oakland over Kentucky. I want to get your thought before we start talking about games today and games tomorrow, including Kansas and Gonzaga. I want to ask you about John Calipari. The number 3 seed Kentucky Wildcats, they fall to Oakland. Kentucky has not done well in the NCAA tournament last few years.
Not lately.
If you recall, they lost to St. Peter's. Kentucky was a 2 seed when they lost 15-2. Last year, they lost to the Kansas State Wildcats as, Kansas State and Jerome Tang made that run to the Elite Eight last season. And then, of course, this year, they fall to Oakland in the opening round. I know that his buyout is incredibly high. It's like $30 million or something for Calipari to leave Kentucky. But there's got to be so much pressure on him because those expectations with the Kentucky fan base as a blue blood, this sort of thing is completely unacceptable.
Right. That's an interesting situation, but I believe that buyout's $34 million.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Now, with Kentucky basketball, I don't know that is a lot. If they get their mindset. But let me ask you this, Tommy. Calipari has said, he's playing a different game nowadays. He's basically 19-year-old boys up against, 22, 23, 24-year-old men. With Oakland, the kid name escapes me right off the top. The guy that hit all the threes towards the end of that game, or at least in the second half, he's 24 years old. He's in the 6th year of college basketball. 6 years, 4 years of at Hillsdale College, redshirt year, and then his last year at Oakland. That's amazing to me. 6 years of college basketball. But with COVID, by the way, it's not cheating or anything. COVID threw a lot of monkey wrenches into a lot of careers and playing time and how many years you can stretch these things out. But with that being said, Calipari is now thinking, you know something, I got to do things differently because we're playing a lot of boys against men, full-grown men, and a lot of college programs are getting that way. They're getting older. They're getting they're getting players out of the portal that are older, more mature, have tired of where they are. They think the opportunities with NIL and other things, that everything is rosier at a different place. We get that, but at that point, they're more mature players. They're older players. They've been through several good. They might have been through an excellent basketball program, have a lot to bring to a program, and now he's starting to think. John Calipari's starting to think. You know something? My formula that has been so successful with regards to bringing players into this program, it's different. It's different, Tommy. I'm going to change things up. We're going to go get a more mature player. And he said that. He said, I've got to reevaluate how we do that. Because after all, he's won national championships with freshmen. I mean, his thing was, remember, for years and years and
years. That
was
what it was.
It was one and done.
One NBA, and done. Get you ready for the NBA, get you ready for the pros, that's all right. of that. And, you know, I would say I'm not sure that there's been a better coach in America to do that, get players ready for the NFL or for the NBA than John Calipari. That being said, though, he's not winning national championships.
Not now.
They're not winning games in the NCAA tournament.
Right.
And I think that the question becomes for Kentucky, what's the priority? Is the priority to get, are we paying John Calipari all this money to get kids to the NBA? Are we paying John Calipari to win championships? They're paying him to win championships.
Well,
they are.
That's exactly right. And right now it's not happening. As a matter of fact, it's just the opposite. The young kids that he has that are fantastic talents. And by the way, a bunch of them are going to end up in the NBA. We know that. We expect that. We know their modo operandi. That's the way it works. But I'll guarantee you one thing. We're at this point of the year, boys against men isn't working for them in terms of postseason play. It's not working. It's working in the regular season, but it's not working at this part of the year. And a change has to be made. He admits it. Now, if I was a Kentucky fan, would I say, hey, let's get us a new coach. We need somebody new. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't be a party to that. And I don't care about the $34 million buyout. I'm saying to myself, where are you going to – okay, let me ask you this, Tommy. Who are you going to get? If you could go get any coach, who are you going to get? Who would you want? Because you may or may not be able to get him. You are Kentucky after all. Yeah. But also people understand, oh, boy, anything less than a national championship, and it's a failure of a season, isn't it? There are pressures at the University of Kentucky that you and I can only imagine what those would be.
Well, there are only a handful of programs in America that have those kinds of consistent expectations.
That's right.
Kansas is one of them. Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke.
UCLA used to be, but it's not. But, I mean, Indiana used to be. I don't know that it still is, but I get it. I get it.
Okay, so I'm reminded of a saying, and this is probably something that as a coach, a football coach, you probably relate to a lot. The old saying of, what is it? Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Right.
And that's what we saw with Oakland and Kentucky yesterday. We saw players for Oakland. Jack Golke is the kid's name that made all the threes. Yeah. And he was lights out. There were all these social media comments about how, Golke is going to be great selling insurance, in his career. He's not going to the NBA. But in that moment, that's what March Madness is made for guys like that to burst onto the national scene, into the spotlight, drain a bunch of shots, lead Cinderella teams. Like, that's what they're there for. And I'll tell you one thing about that guy and that entire team, that you better believe they work hard. Yeah. They always work hard.
Yeah.
And I'm not suggesting that Kentucky doesn't work hard, but I am suggesting that some of these guys that are freshmen that are going to go to the NBA, they are not as good right now, clearly, as they will be in the NBA. Some of them are going to be outstanding NBA professionals. But in that moment, they were leaning on their talent. They were leaning on their pedigree, all of that. And I'm just going to say it. Oakland outworked them yesterday.
There are some youngsters at the University of Kentucky haven't matured totally yet. Are you kidding?
Sure.
They're still teenagers, Tommy. Teenagers. So with that being said, you're exactly right. They will mature. That's why you start looking at some of those guys and, man, they make great pros and they put out a lot of pros, but they mature into that. These kids aren't mature. Kentucky lost to a 24-year-old, sixth-year senior.
Who's probably going to sell insurance next year.
Well, that's good
right?
for him.
I mean,
I would hire him if I could get him into my insurance company. I think he'd be a great one.
And that's not a knock on him.
No, it's not
a
knock on him. Of course it's not.
But it's just kind of like highlighting that difference between a program like Kentucky. And think about, I know you like to talk about NIL. Think about all the NIL dollars for these highly touted players that John Calipari brings into Kentucky. So if you're not only comparing the talent of the players and the pedigree of the players, but you're also comparing the NIL dollars, think about how much Kentucky has invested in those players only to be beat by Oakland University yesterday.
How much NIL do you think? What was the kid's name again? What was
Golke? Jack Golke.
Yeah. How much do you think he's getting in NIL money?
Not much.
I'm guessing
not much.
Maybe not even.
Maybe not anything.
I don't even know if it's anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, I find that interesting that you bring up that point because you're exactly right. You're exactly right. But that's the beautiful part about. And by the way, I have never looked at the NCAA tournament as this vehicle for the NBA. The NBA is the furthest thing from my mind in this course of the 3 weeks of the NCAA basketball tournament. I don't think about the NBA. Do you think about these kids?
No.
I don't either. I do not either.
Think, and maybe it's not the tournament. Maybe it's just college basketball in general. Don't you think that's always on the minds of those freshmen?
Yeah,
the NBA?
Is. Well, and particularly.
And how do I get there? How do I get there the quickest?
Right.
How do I get there and maximize my earning potential?
Right.
I mean, those are all things that, and I would even suggest that in the world of NIL, the opportunities are there for players like that Kentucky has to develop longer because you're going to be able to get paid at least something in college.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really interesting question. If you're the athletic director at Kentucky, do you keep John Calipari or do you pay that buyout?
It's not even for me. It's not even worthy consideration.
Really?
I'm keeping Calipari because he understands basketball. He gets what he wants out of these kids. Now, he's already admitted that he's going to shake up a little bit the way he does things. Probably needs to. I think he probably needs to. He needs to figure out a way to keep some of these kids and keep them mature. And by the way, I don't believe one of these days we'll get into this NIL stuff with maybe somebody who's really knowledgeable on it. But I don't believe basketball is paying as well as football money in NIL.
No, it doesn't.
So it's not.
No.
There are youngsters in football, not many, but there's a handful of youngsters in football making more money than it's. Let's say they were a second-round draft pick. They're making more money in NIL than they would be in the NFL. So you get the college deal, stay in college, that kind of. But in the NBA, it's not that way. They're not making the money that basketball players are, at least most of the really good ones. So I'm thinking to myself that something, you go to college, and if you want to be in the NBA, the Calipari system is good, but it's proving that it's not because the maturity of kids that you're competing against at this level, at this late date of the year. That's the other key. You're late into the year. It's been a long year. I mean, you've taken a lot of pounding, a lot of trips. I mean, you've used a lot of energy, and mature kids are obviously what you would want at this point more than, say, a 19-year-old kid.
I would move on from John Calipari. I would try to find a way to rally the donor base to pay that buyout.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because in my mind, there is not another coach in college basketball where it is so obvious that the game has passed him by. Mm-hmm. The way that the game is played and the way that the entire business of college basketball is put together than John Calipari.
All right, I'm going to do an experiment right now. Tony, permission to do a quick experiment? This is kind of just off the top of my head. Hold on just a second. I'm going to take my headset off.
Okay, I don't know what you're doing here. I don't know what you're doing here.
Who all thinks Calipari should be fired? Raise your hand.
Okay, so we got a few handfuls, hands up there. We got some hands up there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rick. Appreciate your help.
I think if it were me, I would absolutely fire John Calipari. I would find that buyout money. I would move on from him. And because as I just talked about, if you're Kentucky, if you are the athletic director for the Wildcats, you want to have a coach there to win championships, not just to develop players for the NFL, for
Right.
the NBA.
Right.
You want them to be there to win a championship.
They've won championships. Look, you got 50 people here. We just did.
How long
did a
has it
count.
been? It's been
you had 40
forever
you had
since they
40
won a championship.
Well, but
It's been forever.
Do you realize how hard it is to
They
win an
lost
NCAA?
to St. Peter's 2 years ago, a 15-2 in the opening round.
Well, that's a good
They
point.
lost to Kansas State a year ago in the second round.
46
They
out of
lost yesterday to Oakland University in the first round.
46 out of 50 people think agree with you.
That is not acceptable for the University of Kentucky. And there are enough coaches that are out there, Paul, in the world of college basketball that are younger, that, understand the world of NIL. They understand the expectations of a program like Kentucky as a blue blood. They can I think there are a handful of coaches out there that would have a better chance of leading Kentucky to a championship than John Calipari. Bottom line.
I think you're totally off base on this. I mean, the fact is that Calipari has the experience to make this work. He's a smart guy. He's not a big dummy. He can make this work. He has now figured out he's got to adjust the way he approaches these players. He's got to adjust to the type of player he keeps.
But
he's
hasn't.
Adjusted.
He hasn't done that.
But
it's been
he has
several
figured out.
years.
But he's figured out he's going to do it. He's admitted he's got to figure a new way. And after all, what's the most important part of solving a problem? Admitting there's a problem, Paul, and identifying the problem.
What else is he going to say? He's going to say, well, I'm not going to figure it out, and so you should probably fire me. Of course he's going to say, I got to figure out another way. They've had major upsets in each of the last 3 tournaments.
I got you.
So,
I get it.
It'd be different if this was the first time that Calipari's team gets upset in the first round by an underdog, by a Cinderella team.
$34 million have any effect on your position? I mean, it is Kentucky, by the way.
They're blue blood.
They're blue blood.
They can get a lot of money. They can rally that donor base.
They can
to pay for the buyout. To pay for a new coach.
Well, I'll tell you what, that'd buy a lot of NIL, wouldn't it?
Well, sure it would.
That'd buy some NIL, wouldn't it?
Now I want to be very clear. I'm not suggesting that John Calipari is a bad basketball coach. He's a national championship. He's a national championship winning coach.
I never assumed that's what you were thinking.
He's been around forever.
I'm thinking you think. You correct me if I'm wrong. I'm thinking you think that times have changed. He has not adjusted. He has not figured out the way of the world as it is now. That he has tried to live in his cocoon a little too long. Is that sort of what you're? I think
I mean, that's part of it. I think that
is part of it. Yeah.
I think that he has been more reluctant and resistant to change in the world of college basketball, because otherwise it wouldn't be 2024 and we're still having this conversation about Kentucky losing in the opening rounds of the NCAA tournament. We wouldn't be continuing to have this conversation if Calipari had figured it out. Other programs have already figured it out. They've already moved forward. And I don't even know what the answer is for Calipari. I don't know. I mean, I'm not getting paid his salary, so it's not up to me to determine what he should do to make it better. I'm saying he's a couple of years behind the curve, and he should have been embracing this several years ago, and he didn't.
Can I make a suggestion as to what I think is going to happen with Calipari? He's not going to get fired. First of all, I think he is a member of the blue blood club, so I don't think he's going to get fired. But I can see where he goes to the portal, where he hasn't gone to the portal like a lot of coaches do now. But I can see him going to the portal and picking up 2, 3, maybe 3 guys that are 4th-year seniors, 5th-year seniors, even maybe. And I think we're past the time where you get a 6th-year senior. Those days are gone because COVID was far enough back. But he's going to go get some of those 4th and 5th-year guys, and he's going to bring them in. He's going to bring several of them, 2 to 3 of them in. And they're going to meld in and show the way. Now they're going to be good athletes too, by the way, because if you're a 5th-year senior and you want to play somewhere where you have a chance to win a national championship, I would say Kentucky might be that place. Kentucky might be the place you'd want to consider. So I think he's going to get some really good players that are going to be 4th and 5th-year seniors, and that's what he's going to do. He's going to go get enough that he's not going to make the whole team veterans. He's going to stick with what works because
But it's not working. It's not working.
Not now, but he's going to infuse enough aged players, older players, to make this work. I think that's what he's going to do. And if he doesn't, he's nuts because, and then another exit like this next year, Katie barred the door. You may be right, Tommy. He might be out on his keister. Well, I have no idea, but it might be.
I think the elephant in the room is, on paper and in theory, that's great to go and get a couple of grad transfers or, older players to supplement your highly touted freshmen.
That's what you got to do.
But the question is, do those grad transfers want to go and play at Kentucky? Because not that they don't like Calipari, but Calipari may not know how to coach guys like that because he's always coaching the freshmen.
Trust me, he knows how to coach basketball players.
Okay.
I mean, and a few years doesn't make it. But I'll tell you one thing: I get a phone call from John Calipari. Hey, you want to come over? I'm from the University of Kentucky. We're going to be pretty good next year. You want a national championship ring? Because if you do, I'm going to give you the chance to play for one. And I'll tell you what, that's pretty darn enticing. Besides the fact we're the University of Kentucky. Let me talk to you about our NIL program and what I can do for you your last year of college basketball. I think you take Calipari and you bring in all the young players. You kind of salt that in with some seasoned, good quality veterans who can play. I don't mean they're just going to go out there and be practice guys who can play and contribute. And there's a plenty of those. And you go get those, you put those two things together, you got yourself a potential national championship basketball team. And now he has blended both what he does, what he knows, what he believes in. He has salted in with what we know as Tommy Castor and Paul Savage. He's going to do what we know works, and that is win a national championship. I think he's onto something. He admitted it in the last press conference.
It's easier said than done. He's got to actually go and execute that.
Of course, it's easier said than done.
My final thought on this: if I am the athletic director at Kentucky, if I can find the money, maybe the money's not available, but if I can find the money to pay that buyout, I do it today. Do it today.
Even for a blue blood. $34 million is a good chunk of cash, Tommy.
It would be worth it. If the athletic director believes that they will not win a national championship with the way that this program is constructed, usually under John Calipari, you have to make that move for the future of the program.
They still won 20. What did they win this year? They still won 24 basketball games. That's a lot of wins. I don't know, Tommy. I think you're really off on this one.
No, I mean, I think that, again, you've got such a deep donor base. You've got such a deep appreciation in that fan base for John Calipari, for the Kentucky Wildcats. I think that for the future benefit of the program, you make that move. Before we take a break, let's go to the KFH hotline, 869-1240. Charles on the line wants to chime in on our Coach Calipari discussion. Charles, welcome in.
Yeah, Tommy, I typically do agree with you, but the one thing I will say is I think a lot of schools are late to the party when it comes to the transfer portal and NIL. For years, Calipari was getting praise about his one-and-done kids. However, they still was getting bounced first or second round of the tournament. So, yeah, I agree with you, Paul. It's not a huge drastic change he needs to make, but it's 5 guys on the court. So, and 2 or 3 transfer portal kids with your Mounds All-Americans, and you're fine.
I don't know. I mean, Charles, I get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, I feel like if Calipari really wanted to move in that direction, he would have done that already. He would have been more willing to make those changes, and he just hasn't done it. Now, he always could.
Hey,
he always could.
This whole thing's a learning curve, Charlie. This whole thing's a learning curve. There's things that we don't understand about the portal as we speak, that it's going to be different this year than it is next year and the following year. We're learning as we go. And I think Calipari's figured this out, Charles.
And you're exactly right. And just look at in our own backyard at Wichita State. Kobe Rogers goes in the transfer portal. And what did Kevin Saul tweet out? I need donors to help out. Like, this is a different age of the college athlete.
It is.
That's right. He is right.
It is.
Charles right on that.
We can jump on Calipari all we want. He is right. He's changed lives when the whole transition to the one and done happened. And now, and he hasn't been the only one to jump on NIL in the transfer portal. Trust me, I will trade lives for Kentucky athlete or Calipari any day of the week. So But do we need to talk about a drastic change of leadership, firing the guy? Not at all. All he needs to do is jump in the portal, get three guys that can really elevate the leadership of the team, and then they're right back. They're right back in the Sweet 16. That's all it is. Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Hey, appreciate the call, Charles.
I think he's right.
Look, I hope he's right. For the sake of John Calipari's job, I hope he's right. I mean, we'll have this conversation probably again a year from now. Make it 4 years in a row that Kentucky gets bounced in the first round. I think that is what we are up against. And by we, I mean the Kentucky fan base. I'm not a Kentucky fan, but by the entire fan base, the people that support that program, that's what you're staring in the face. Mm-hmm. If Calipari doesn't get it right, then you're going to be having more and more years of them being upset and going home early.
Well,
and for a blue blood, Paul, that is absolutely unacceptable.
Well, anything less than a national championship is, let's face it, unacceptable, Tommy.
So by that regard, the last several years have been unacceptable for Kentucky. Oakland moves on to the second round. It's going to be, a big game for them, taking on NC State tomorrow. That was another upset. They took down Texas Tech. On the other side of the break, let's talk briefly about the Colby Rogers situation, him going to the transfer portal for Wichita State.
Let's do it.
We'll touch on that. We'll also tell you about the games coming up for March Madness, the day 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. We are live at the FanDuel Sportsbook, Kansas Star Casino. It's Sports Daily, coming right back. All right, welcome back, everybody. Sports Daily continues here on KFH, live from the FanDuel Sportsbook at Kansas Star Casino. On your way to work or even heading down here to the Kansas Star Casino, if you want to keep listening to Sports Daily, even after you get out of your car, with the Odyssey app and Odyssey.com, you can just download the app or visit Odyssey.com and search for KFH. Download the Odyssey app today to get started. By the way, Paul, every single March Madness game you can listen to for absolutely free on the Odyssey app.
Oh, that's tremendous. I use my Odyssey app, I mean, literally several times a day. Are you kidding? Of course.
Well, we're down here, of course, at the FanDuel Sportsbook at the Kansas Star Casino. Day number 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. The games get going here in less than an hour, Paul. One game, it's an 8-9 matchup that's going to kick off the day, Northwestern and FAU. That's going to be an interesting game for sure, with Florida Atlantic, of course, making the Final Four a year ago. Shocker fans know all about FAU, and now that they're in the American Conference. And there was some news with the Shockers yesterday. Colby Rogers, leading scorer for Paul Mills' team, entering the transfer portal. That's a big blow for the Shocker program that I think had a little bit of momentum as they ended the season after they made that little run in the American tournament.
Well, he was the go-to guy. I mean, he was one of those guys that was so important to the success, or I should say the limited success that the Shockers had. He's the one guy I didn't want to see go. But, everything changes. I mean, I can't – how do we even predict who comes, who goes? I mean, I can't do it. I don't know. We don't know these kids' situation.
Yeah.
But I'm sure his experience at Wichita State has been good. I'm sure his experience with the staff, with the coaching staff, with those involved in Shocker athletics has been good. The problem is I don't know how good NIL is. And it would appear to, and I don't know, I'm speculating. I want everybody to understand this is just a speculation that it may be NIL related. It may be that he's wanting more than the Shockers have at this point. Speculation, wouldn't be surprised.
I think that there are a lot of teams out there, obviously, that would love a player the caliber of Colby Rogers.
He's going to get taken. He's not going to be left in the portal.
The way that he shoots the ball,
That's
and
right.
The way that he's able to really take over games offensively. We saw it game after game for Wichita State this season and even last season. The fact is that he's got a great opportunity to earn. He's got a great opportunity to be able to cash in from another program. And not only that, Paul, potentially be on a team that, let's just be honest, significantly better than Wichita State was this year.
Right.
So if you can do both, if you can make money and if you can go on a team that can make an NCAA tournament run, I think that that's a no-brainer for a player like Colby Rogers. Doesn't make it any easier for the program at Wichita State to lose a player the caliber of Colby Rogers. But again, it's the reality of the world that we're in now.
Well, you go to college to make money. You go to college to be able to make more money, and that's what the portal is. Don't blame him. Don't blame him at all if he can better his financial situation, help his family, help himself. I mean, who's to say don't do it? Because as much as we want him, and as much as at certain times of the year, Wichita State, the success they had was partly and a lot of
times it was him.
Had a lot to do with him.
And there were a bunch of games, Paul, where the Shockers couldn't find offense anywhere else but Colby Rogers.
But him.
And so that leaves a huge hole for Paul Mills to fill in the portal this year. And I don't know. I mean, you're not going to – I don't think – maybe I'm wrong. I don't know if you're going to be able to find a player of that caliber in the portal to replace that production. You might have to go a couple of different places in the portal and maybe, I don't know, try to bring in – I know they're limited on their open roster spots. You got to get creative in trying to find a way to replace that production because, as we talked about before, they have to be better next season. They have to. And this makes it that much more difficult to do so when you lose Colby Rogers.
I don't know why I read between the lines on what you were saying, but I'm going to ask you if my take on what you just said about being creative in the portal. Are you talking about the potential of taking a good close look at Division II players, maybe?
No.
I'm sorry. I thought I didn't know where you were going with
what I'm
being
saying,
creative, because I'm not sure I know what that means.
Well, what I'm saying is that, okay, you've got Colby Rogers, and I don't have it in front of me. I think he averaged like 19 points a game.
Right. Okay.
You might be
that's right.
You might be hard pressed to find another player in the portal that averages 19 a game to come to Wichita State. So maybe you have to find 2 players that average 12, to be able to replace and maybe even do more than what Colby Rogers did a year ago.
You start to sound like Billy Bean in Moneyball. You find 3 players in the aggregate. Remember that line?
Yeah.
We're going to find 3 players in the aggregate, and the guys say, what's aggregate?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you're saying then, isn't it?
That's what you might have to do if you're Wichita State.
Wow.
And, I know that there's been ongoing concerns about NIL dollars and that sort of thing. This is a crucial and critical offseason for Paul Mills, simply because of not only the expectations, because this year did not go well, but because of the fact that your leading scorer is now in the portal and you got to try to find a way to replace that. And we don't know, Paul, if there are going to be other players from the program that end up leaving. We don't know that yet.
Yeah. Well, here's part of the problem. There's a lot of things that we don't even know about NIL and Wichita State. We know they're trying. We know they're trying to get money raised, but we don't. There's a lot we don't know in there. For instance, to say Wichita State compared to Memphis, that's another conference member in the AAC.
Yeah.
How does that money in NIL compare between the 2 schools? See, I'm not even sure I know. Do you?
Well, I mean, I don't know for sure. But
I don't know for sure
I
either.
would anticipate that Memphis.
Well, you would
anticipate
that, but what I'm saying is we don't know. There's a lot that we are assuming and we are thinking we know, but we don't know. So I'm just saying that, gosh, it's just going to be such a big year. And who do you go get? And we all know guys are going in the portal not for 100% of the reason of money, but there is an element of going into the portal trying to make some money off of a new school, and that's the way it needs to be. And if that's what you got to do to make your family situation better, your situation better, who's to say? I'm not going to say don't do it. Are you? Because I'm not.
No, and I don't begrudge Colby Rogers at all.
I don't either.
For making the move. I mean, you got to do what's best for you.
That's right.
Your earning potential and all of that. But I think both things can be true. You don't begrudge him for that move, but then also that is a large blow to the program that it's going to be a challenge for Paul Mills to find a way to replace that. That's just the bottom line.
It's going to be a huge challenge, and it's got to be done. And everything's so visible on this stuff. I mean, who's getting who and when it happens. And I'll tell you what, it's just a under the gun that I kind of feel bad for the staff at Wichita State to see Colby Rogers. I mean, could the news be any worse losing one of your best players into the portal? I don't.
I think that the major thing on this is that it's not just that you're losing your best player, your leading scorer to the portal. It's like I mentioned at the top, they had momentum ending their season.
Right.
There were some signs that things are starting to come together for Wichita State.
Yep.
That they're maybe starting to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe next season things will work well for them.
Yep. And
then all of a sudden, boom, you lose your leading scorer.
Yeah, a guy that, gosh, if you could just, you could build around for next year. I gotcha. That's a really good point. So I guess the next thing that you do is if you're Paul Mills, you got to go into the portal. But I don't know how you do that if you're playing with less money than some of the. Listen, and I asked you how much Memphis has in NIL money. You weren't sure. You assumed it was higher. You know something? Me too.
Yeah.
I assume it's higher. I assume it's a lot higher. In fact, I assume it's a whole bunch higher than Wichita State. Now, that would be my assumption. But I don't know about the rest of the AAC, but I can tell you this, whatever the amount is, we expect better of Wichita State than the AAC. We expect better than that. We expect better than that than the Florida schools. We expect better than that of Tulane. We expect better than that of Tulsa. We expect better than that of Well, name the team.
Yeah.
Name whoever's Temple. Name whoever.
How about a team that's playing in the NCAA tournament today? FAU.
FAU? That's
UAB
right.
is also playing in the tournament today.
You expect better than both. I don't know if that happens, but you look at Wichita State and you look at the Roundhouse and you say, this place is.
Yeah.
We got to get this place hopping again. How do you do that? Well, you win. You get players. How do you get players? Well, NIL is now a big part of this. And
hey, it certainly doesn't help when you lose your leading scorer.
Oh man,
it does not help the future at all. So they've certainly got their work to do in the portal this offseason.
Yeah, you're right.
We're going to follow it all along because they've got to be aggressive, and it does start with NIL. I know that's been at the top of people's minds when it comes to Wichita State for quite a while. How does their NIL compare to other programs?
Gotcha.
We're going to keep you posted on all of that. All right, let's take a timeout. On the other side, we're going to wrap up the show, our final full segment. Get you ready for day number 2 of March Madness, our favorite games of the slate today.
Beautiful.
On this Friday. We're going to do that on the other side, live at the FanDuel Sportsbook, Kansas Star Casino. It's Sports Daily on KFH. We'll be right back. All right, everybody, final full segment of the show today here on Sports Daily on this Friday. Tom Castor, Paul Savage, Chad Chambers back in the studio. Paul, we've got a couple of minutes left. So we're going to do a rapid-fire round or a lightning round on the games that are coming up here today for day number 2 of the opening round of the NCAA tournament. Talk just briefly. I'm just going to ask you your picks for the game, who you like throughout the entire slate of games today. We'll start with the game that tips off at 11:15. Northwestern, Florida Atlantic, the 8 seed Northwestern, the 9. Who do you like?
Well, I've got Northwestern in that. No offense to Florida, but I've got Northwestern. I don't know why. I don't know. Who do you got?
Hey, I like Florida Atlantic.
Do you? All right.
Dusty May is a great coach. He's probably, I would think, on his way out, maybe going to a larger school next year. Of course, Florida Atlantic made the Final Four last year, so I'm going to go with Florida Atlantic. Colgate and Baylor, the next game. It's the 14-3 matchup. Any way in your mind that Colgate upsets your alma mater?
No, I've got Baylor going into the Final Four, so right. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's not one of my upsets.
And by the way,
either.
that's not just because, it's my school.
Sure.
It's because they're not a bad basketball team.
They're not.
Now, will they win a national championship? I don't think they're as good as Houston, but they're still not a bad basketball team.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we all know about Scott Drew. We know that he is a national championship winning coach. I like Baylor in this game to move forward. No upset on this one. The next game, another American Conference team, UAB, the 12 seed, taking on San Diego State. Can UAB upset San Diego State?
I'm not sure. I know a lot about San Diego State, but I know they were pretty good last year.
Well, yeah, I mean,
so,
they made it.
So
they went all the way.
I've got San Diego State, and the reason I've got them is just because they've been here, they've done that.
Yeah.
They've still got some of the players from last year's team. It's a good basketball team. They still have 24 wins. It's still quite a good. It's a good basketball team. I went ahead and took them just because of the experience they have.
Yeah, that's my rationale too. Brian Dutcher, I think, is one of the more underrated coaches in America. He led San Diego State almost all the way last year, and UAB, they only got into the tournament because they won the American tournament. So I'm going to take San Diego State with that victory, the 5 over the 12. Western Kentucky and Marquette, the 2-15 matchup. Marquette, the questions have been, will Tyler Kolek play? Is he healthy? It sounds like he will play. Do you think Marquette moves on?
Now, here's what I know about Western Kentucky is that they're in the western part of the state. So with that,
that's all you know.
But being said, obviously, I don't think they can win. I'm going to go ahead and take who was it?
Marquette.
Marquette.
I like Marquette too.
I'm going to take Marquette. Marquette's not bad.
Yeah,
they've been on television a lot in the last month, so I've watched them enough to know that's not a bad basketball team. I'll go ahead and take Marquette.
UConn and Stetson. I know that region is incredibly difficult that UConn is in. In my mind, they should have no trouble taking down Stetson.
No trouble at all. That's a good call, Tommy.
I do love this upset, though. This is one of my favorites of the entire day. New Mexico over Clemson, the 11 over the 6. And again, it would make all 4 11 seeds winners in the opening round. I think you like Clemson, though, right?
I do. I've got, and by the way, I think I'm probably in the majority. Most people will probably have Clemson. You see something in New Mexico that you like, and that's a good basketball team, but Clemson's not bad either.
Auburn and Yale, the 4-13 matchup. I don't think anybody wants to play Auburn. Bruce Pearl is great. They are a physical, tough team. I know Yale, surprises a few folks every now and then with the way they shoot the basketball. I'm taking Auburn to move on.
Auburn is 27-7, having gone through the gauntlet of the SEC. They are a good, tough-nosed program. Coach Pearl, you and I both know he's going to preach tough defense. And I like Auburn. I've got Auburn going quite a way. I got them being beat in the semis by Iowa State. But Auburn's going to float through this thing quite a bit.
Colorado and Florida, the 7-10 matchup. I like Colorado. I mean, I really do. I know that Tad Boyle has got his guys ready to go. Florida has come on strong as of late, but I like the Buffaloes to move on.
I mean, I've got Florida. I've got Florida. I think it's going to be a great game. Colorado had to play just a couple days ago. So I've got Florida winning. Part of that is a fatigue issue as well. So there you go.
The 8-9 matchup, Nebraska, Texas A&M. I like Nebraska. Fred Hoiberg has got that team playing really well. They like to call it Nebraska ball, and so I'm a fan of Nebraska. I'm going to take them.
Hey, I got them too.
Yeah.
Texas A&M, good basketball team, but I just they're a number 9 seed, but I've got Nebraska.
My upset of the day: Vermont over Duke. I love that matchup. I loved it on Selection Sunday. I think Vermont, the 13 seed, upsets Duke.
Where did you get that? I mean, well, how
I
did you
think
get?
it's a great
Did
matchup.
you just pick that out of
I
you?
think
You
it's a
know
great,
what?
no, I think it's a great matchup for Vermont. I like that upset.
Yeah, if I'm Vermont, I want Duke. Yeah, okay.
Okay, how about this? We're going to run through these really quickly.
Okay.
Purdue, Grambling State, Houston, Longwood, both 1-16 matchups.
Yeah,
Those are going to be
I got
easy.
the ones.
Do you like Charleston over Alabama, the 13 over the 4?
No, I got Alabama.
I like Alabama also. I do like James Madison over Wisconsin, the 12 over 5.
I've got that too. And by the way, I did not know you had that
I
until
like
just a
that
little while ago. I've got James Madison as well.
TCU, Utah State, the 8-9 matchup. I'm going with TCU. Big 12, I think they're going to move on.
Same here. I've got TCU.
And last but not least, I like this upset also. Grand Canyon over St. Mary, the 12 over the 5. It's going to be wild. It's going to be great. Everything tips off in just a few minutes from now. We're going to wrap up the show next on Sports Daily.
Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel.
KFH.
All right, that's going to wrap things up for us today here live from the FanDuel Sportsbook at Kansas Star Casino. Normal day of programming on the network. We've got Shocker Baseball on KFH, a 3-game set on the road at UAB this weekend. You can hear all the action right here on KFH. Every single March Madness game you can listen live on the free Odyssey app. Our deepest appreciation to Brian Hargrove and the staff here at the FanDuel Sportsbook at the Kansas Star Casino. It's been an awesome couple of days. So much fun. Our thanks to Tony Dusing, our program director, for helping us get all set up and here with us the entire way. Jad Chambers producing the show back in the studio for Paul Savage. Hope you had fun, buddy.
Oh, man, this has been a ball. Thanks for letting me come out with you, Tommy.
Enjoy all the games today and the rest of the weekend. Hopefully everybody's bracket turns out. Hopefully you all win some money. We'll see you back here.
Sports, lighter news, and great comedy with Bob and Tom mornings, 97.5 and 1240 KFH, Wichita.